the Chronos.
Chapter 1. The River of Gold. Constant, metallic clicking of the giant water clock inside the terminal tower of Ostia sounded like a slow, unyielding executioner. The bronze gears turned with a heavy, clinical rhythm, dropping a single, perfect sphere of dark lead into an iron basin every hour. Clink, 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 marking the death of time. Lord Cassian stood before the grand glass windows of his executive office, a heavy gold ledger clutched in his soft hands. He was 38 winters old, the supreme director of the Imperial Shipping Registries, a man who managed the movement of 300 merchant vessels across the seas. Cassian was a human storm of movement. He was constantly shouting commands at his clerks, constantly reading messages from traveling couriers, and always running from one council meeting to the next. He treated his life like a race that could be won by moving faster, packing every minute with business negotiations and plans for the next season. Yet, as he looked at the turning gears of the clock, his eyes were wide, sunken, and bloodshot from months of total exhaustion. His mind was a chaotic maze of noise. The registry for the northern lumber ships must be completed before the noon watch. Cassian muttered, his voice dry, his fingers frantically scanning a stack of papyrus documents. And the meeting with the grain merchants, I must move it forward by an hour to fit the inspection of the lower docks. I have no time. There are not enough hours in the day to secure these lines. If I pause for even 10 minutes, the entire harbor structure will fall behind. I must speed up the clerks. I must work through the night again. He was living his life as a frantic prisoner of the clock. He wasn't experiencing the real hours of his life today. He was treating every living second as a mere stepping stone to reach a tomorrow that was always moving away. He believed his frantic rush was efficiency, completely blind to the fact that his inability to manage time was turning his life into a chaotic blur, spending his most precious, irreplaceable resource on trivial friction while his soul remained completely empty. From the dark shadow near the wooden book stands sat Zeno. He was an old, retired astronomer who had spent 40 winters mapping the slow, majestic movements of the stars before stepping away from public life to live a life of quiet philosophical study. He wore nothing but a coarse, uncolored canvas cloak, and his posture was completely relaxed, his hands resting quietly on his knees. He had been quietly watching Cassian scream at his secretaries for over 3 hours. "You are throwing your gold into a bottomless well, Cassian," Zeno said, his voice deep, slow, and unshakable, cutting through the frantic noise of the room like an iron axe striking wood. "You call yourself a master of efficiency, but I see a helpless target who lets every passing piece of paper, every trivial meeting, and every minor distraction plunder his life until he has nothing left but a handful of gray ash." Chapter 2. The illusion of the merchant. Cassian spun around, his gold ledger hitting the marble table with a loud crash. "A target. You speak with the ignorance of a man who has no responsibilities, astronomer. This is the imperial trade line. If I do not move at this speed, the empire stalls. Tell me about time being money, Zeno. To sit still and watch the clouds like you do is a betrayal of my duty. I am maximizing my output. Time is not money, Cassian," Zeno replied, slowly rising from his stone seat. He walked over to the desk, picked up a single, valuable silver coin from Cassian's table, and held it up under the light of the oil lamp. Then, he picked up a small wooden cup of fresh water from the basin. "Come out to the balcony. Let us look at the value of your currency." Cassian marched after him, his breath coming in tight gasps, his face tight with defensive frustration. "Tell me, Cassian," Zeno said, pointing down at a wealthy merchant in the street below who had just dropped his leather money pouch into a dark drainage grating. The merchant was screaming at his servants, sending them into the mud with long hooks to retrieve the gold pieces. If that man fails to find his silver coins tonight, can he earn them back tomorrow? Can he trade another cargo of oil to restore his wealth? "Of course he can," Cassian muttered. "The market opens every morning." "Exactly." Zeno nodded, his eyes locking onto Cassian's restless gaze with a clinical clarity. "Property can be restored. Gold can be earned again. Reputation can be rebuilt. But look at the hours you spent today screaming at your clerks over a formatting error on a shipping manifest. Can you go down into the street tomorrow and buy those 4 hours back from the market? Can the emperor grant you a single extra minute if you offer him the entire provincial treasury? Cassian froze, his jaw tightening. Not a single second, Zeno whispered, his voice dropping into that deep, heavy cadence of the inner citadel. People are frugal in guarding their personal property, but as soon as it comes to squandering time, they are most wasteful of the one thing in which it is right to be stingy. Every time you allow a trivial distraction, an unnecessary meeting, or a petty social obligation to capture your attention, you are letting a thief enter your vault and steal the only wealth that actually belongs to you. You are acting as if you had a contract with fate that guarantees you an eternity, while your container is leaking from the bottom every single second. Chapter 3. The Anatomy of the Hourglass. Zeno pulled a small wooden hourglass from his cloak and set it on the marble railing between them. The dark sand began to drop through the narrow neck. Hiss, 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 a soft, rhythmic sound that felt heavier than the striking of an iron bell. The frantic man lives his life in a permanent state of displacement. Zeno explained, tapping the glass. He is always somewhere else. When he is at dinner with his family, his mind is at the Senate. When he is at the Senate, his mind is at his counting house. He treats the present hour as an obstacle, a piece of trash to be thrown away so he can reach the next meeting. Because he cannot anchor his focus to the present second, he never actually lives, he merely prepares to live, moving from one year to the next in a state of blind friction until he wakes up at 70 winters old and realizes that his life has passed by without him ever showing up to witness it. He pointed to the sand that had already collected at the bottom of the glass. "Look at the scale of the sovereign soul, Cassian," the old astronomer whispered, his voice carrying the weight of the mountain stone. The wise man knows that time is a river that flows in only one direction. He does not try to speed up the current or build a dam against the tide. He builds his fortress entirely within the boundaries of the present hour. When he writes a law, he writes it as if there were nothing else in the universe. When he speaks to a friend, he looks into his eyes as if the marketplace did not exist. He eliminates the trivial with a sharp iron knife. He says no to the invitations of the flatterers, no to the gossip of the bathhouses, and no to the false urgency of the world. He protects his attention as if it were his own blood. Zeno leaned closer, his face a mask of absolute structure. Every morning, when you open your eyes, apply the clinical scale of mortality. Look at the stack of tasks on your desk and ask your soul, if my thread were to be cut by fate before the sun sets tonight, is this the work I would want to spend my last hours on? If the answer is no, then the task is a phantom. Strip away the excess, clear the fog of your busy work, and spend your limited energy only on the virtue of the living second. Chapter 4. The Day of the Silence. 4 weeks later, the ultimate evaluation of the ledger arrived. A sudden, catastrophic outbreak of a heavy mountain fever hit the port district of Ostia, forcing the imperial governors to place the entire shipping office under an immediate, mandatory 3-day quarantine lock. The main gates were barred from the outside by the Legion. The messengers were forbidden from entering the avenue, and the desks of the 100 clerks were left completely empty. The frantic movement was arrested in a single morning. Cassian was left alone inside his executive office. There were no couriers running through the doors, no Senate councils to attend, and no registries to sign. The room was an absolute, suffocating void of silence. The first 24 hours were a descent into an internal hell. The frantic animal instinct, the habit of constant, uncoordinated movement, stormed his mind with an immense fury. His fingers were twitching, his heart hammering against his ribs in a state of hysterical restlessness. He walked from wall to wall, his boots echoing loudly against the marble tiles. He wanted to scream through the windows to the passing guards, begging them for a project, a ledger, a crisis, anything to kill the silence. He was so terrified of being still that the emptiness felt like a physical blade cutting into his chest. He realized that, without his busywork, he had no identity left. He was an actor who had been left on an empty stage after the audience had walked away. On the second night, on the verge of a total breakdown, his eyes fell upon the wooden hourglass Zeno had left on his marble railing. He stopped pacing. His breath was ragged, his brow covered in a cold sweat. He looked at the sand dropping through the neck. He remembered the old astronomer's words, "You are a dying man who is wasting his gold on dirt." With an immense, unprecedented effort of iron will, Cassian forced himself to sit down on a plain, unadorned wooden bench in the center of his silent office. He closed his eyes. He didn't check the sky, he didn't look for a pen. He forced his mind to step back from the edge of the future. He didn't ask, "What if I am ruined?" he asked. "What is the factual reality in front of my boots right now?" The red fog of his false urgency evaporated, leaving a cold, razor-sharp and absolute clarity. Chapter 5. The Authentic Master. By the third morning of the quarantine, a profound, historic transformation had occurred inside the soul of the director. The frantic, breathless pacing had completely vanished. Cassian's posture had changed, his shoulders were square, his jaw was relaxed, and his eyes carried a deep, unhurried serenity that had nothing to do with the chaotic masks of his past. He spent his hours reading the old scrolls of philosophy, exercising his frame in the quiet light of the window, and sitting in absolute stillness for hours without a single muscle twitching. He found that when he stopped running from the silence, the hour opened up into an infinite, beautiful room. He was no longer a victim running from an executioner. He was the master of his own territory. On the fourth morning, the heavy iron bars of the office gates were removed with a loud crash. The clerks poured back into the outer halls, the couriers ran through the avenues, and a stack of 300 urgent shipping manifests was thrown onto Cassian's desk by a panicked secretary. "The quarantine is lifted, Lord Cassian," the secretary shouted, his face pale with stress. "We have lost 3 days of production. The merchants are screaming at the gates. We must work double shifts to catch up. Here are the logs, sign them immediately." Cassian looked at the massive stack of papers. He looked at the frantic secretary. His pulse did not quicken. His hand did not shake. He smiled, a genuine, powerful expression of absolute inner freedom. He reached out, took the top 10 documents representing the vital food supply for the winter, and set them in the center of his desk. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he took the remaining 200 pages of non-essential luxury trade agreements and pushed them completely off the table, letting them fall to the floorboards in an orderly heap. "The winter grain is our only duty today," Cassian said, his voice deep, slow, and perfectly unshakable, silencing the room instantly. "The rest can wait until the next moon. If the merchants scream, let them scream. I am no longer operating according to their panic." The secretary stared at him in absolute, paralyzed confusion. "But Lord Cassian, the output, the efficiency numbers, if we do not rush, we will lose our leverage in the Senate." Cassian placed a steady, calm hand over his own heart, his eyes looking through the clerk with an unshakable weight. "I spent 30 winters rushing, and the only thing I achieved was losing my own life to a stack of paper. The quarantine didn't take my time, soldier, it gave me my perspective. The Senate can keep their metrics. I finally own my own hour. No. Do not let your mind be distracted by the things that pass away. Limit yourself to the present hour, and you will find an infinite wealth within your own borders." Cassian took a deep, clean breath of the morning air, took up his pen, and began to write the first line of the grain registry with an unhurried, razor-sharp, and mathematical precision that made the chaos of the outer harbor look like a distant, harmless shadow. The river of time was still flowing, his thread was still burning, but as he stood straight against the wind, he knew he was finally unshakable. Most of us spend our entire lives trapped in the prison of false urgency and time anxiety. We run from one notification to the next, we pack our calendars with meaningless obligations, and we treat our days like a race to be won, completely blind to the fact that while we chase the next milestone, our life is dying in the background. We are squandering the only truly limited, irreplaceable currency we possess on things that do not care about our souls. But a Stoic knows that a well-spent hour is worth more than a century of frantic movement. The next time you find yourself scrolling through digital screens out of boredom, throwing your attention at gossip, or letting a false urgency fracture your peace of mind, stop. Remember the iron clock of Ostia. Take a deep breath, drop your useless busywork, and say to your sovereign soul, "This hour belongs to my character." Clear the external noise, cut away the trivial with an iron knife, and spend your limited energy only on the virtue of the present second. The time is short. Stop running, live right now. This is Aurelium, final transmission on the ultimate mastery over time. Stay unshakable. Take care of yourself.